Welcome to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County, and this show is about Plymouth County real estate. We're going to be reporting on the recordings for December, this being in January. I'm here at Brockton Cable Access with the great help of Michelle Hebsche. I'm then going to talk about something a little different in the second segment of the show, the process of how a document goes through the registry. And then we're going to go into some county and colony history. So let's get right to the numbers. You're going to see an image of deeds. There were 610 deeds recorded in January, more than the 605 in November, 10% more than last year, pretty much the same as last year overall. Our average sale price to date went up to $682,969. You're going to see an image of all the deeds, sales of property for all 27 of our communities, from Abington to Whitman. As you see, the higher number of sales have always gone to Plymouth and Brockton, but every one of our communities has had sales of property. The next image you're going to see is of mortgages. Most people buy their home with a mortgage. There were 1,150 mortgages recorded in December, more than the 1,134 in November, and we're up 4% year to date. Next image you're going to see is of foreclosure deeds. We have followed foreclosure issues very closely since the meltdown in 2008. Those are horrible times. A lot of people lost their property, and there were major events to try to hold on to properties at the old Christos II, at the Arnone School, and others, St. Patrick's Church along the way. So we've clearly been on top of those. We share these documents with NeighborWorks in an effort to try to help people modify their loans, but the numbers have been very low since COVID. There were only 9 foreclosure deeds in December, less than the 12 in November, up 13% over last year. The next image you're going to see again relates to foreclosures. A foreclosure deed is when a property has been taken back by a lender, usually for non-payment, sometimes caused by job issues, health issues, whatever. We hate to see that happening, but the lender's entitled, if nobody's paying the mortgage, to take back that property. Foreclosure notices are the first document we see in the foreclosure chain. It's a notice that gets recorded, and it really lets somebody know that they're having trouble, that we know they're having trouble. And again, these documents get forwarded to NeighborWorks to try to modify these loans. There were 35 foreclosure notices in December, more than the 33 in November, but still, these are very, very low compared to traditional months before COVID. Again, the lenders don't seem to be forcing them forward as much. And again, if you're in trouble, don't hesitate. People that hesitate are going to have more trouble fixing the problem. And you're going to see in a listing of foreclosures in orders of notice, there's still a lot of zeros there, both in terms of deeds and notices. Again, we don't know when they're going to start to pick up, but following it and being aware is the best thing you can do. So there is one way to watch your property very closely. There is a opportunity to go onto our website under our resources and go to Fraud Alert. For free, you can sign up with Fraud Alert with your email and your name, and any document that gets recorded under your name, you'll get an email. Now, it may not all be related to you. For example, if your name is Smith, you'll get hundreds of those. But it gives you a heads up as to what is happening in our registry resources. And if something goes on record that shouldn't, you immediately have the ability to jump on that and try to solve that problem. I strongly advise that everybody do the best they can to preserve their property. There are a lot of outside influences, sometimes fraud. Fraud sometimes come within family members, but protect your property. For most people, it is your most valuable asset. Thank you. So in segment 2 of the show, I usually have a guest, home inspectors, realtors, commercial real estate brokers, a lot of people involved in the real estate community. I thought for this January show, it would be helpful if I describe to the viewers how records are created and preserved at the Registry of Deeds. Most of our documents come in as recorded documents. They come in at multiple places. Comes in our main office in Plymouth, over in person. Can come in person in our Brockton office on Belmont Street, in our Rockland office over in Hingham Street in Rockland. But most of our recorded documents are coming in over the internet now. We have what is called electronic filing. They sign up and are allowed to electronically record based upon their status as a business, as a lawyer, and they have an intermediary agreement, and they submit those documents over the internet to our staff. Now, those can be reviewed in Plymouth, Rockland, or Brockton. They're reviewed by the same standard. We have index standards, the same standard as required for every document. They have to meet the font, they have to meet the requirement, they have to be a document that relates to real estate, those kinds of things. So when our recorders review them and they assign recorded documents a book and page, those documents are deemed recorded. But that's not all. The next phase of that document goes to create images of them, because every single document that we record there is an image created from that submitted document. So the image is created. The next step is to, although there's some preliminary information at the recording, it then goes to our indexing department that makes sure that all of the indexing information, the seller, the buyer, the type of document, is correct. Because it's one thing to record millions of documents, but if you can't find them by a perfect index, they're no good to anybody, and certainly not to your chain of title. So our indexes use certain standards, create indexes. If it's a complicated trust or something like that, they're different than just first and last names. And that is a very important process of what we do. Documents then go on to a microfilm department. We're required by law to create microfilm copies of every document submitted at the Registry of Deeds. And that microfilm is the best way in the records under the state statutes to preserve a document. If all else fails at the registry, you can recreate the registry from microfilm. We obviously have other ways. We have backup servers. We have other ways to preserve the documents. But that is required by Massachusetts law to create microfilm copies of every document. And those microfilm documents get put on a reel and sent off-site to a company called Iron Mountain just over the Massachusetts border in New York, so we can bring those back and recreate the registry if necessary. Now, there's also a second side of the registry called a land court. It's called registered land. Created in 1899 to create perfect titles. So if your document doesn't have a book and page on it, it has a certificate number that is considered registered land. We have a separate registered land department. We call it our land court, and they will take documents the same way. They will record them, make sure they meet the standards. They will create a certificate based upon that recording, and all the encumbrances for that document is listed on that encumbrance sheet. Absolute pure title. Registered land is far more complicated than recorded land. There are new statutes that allow people to transfer their land out of registered land into recorded land, but that's less of a complicated process than it was, and we will have people doing that on a regular basis. We also pride ourselves in our customer service. So if somebody's just going in for a copy of their deed, they have a question about a recording, want to make sure that their title has been cleaned by the recording of discharges, you can go into our main office in Plymouth. We have a separate customer service department, and in the satellites, our recorders act as customer service. So if you go into the Brockton or Rockland office, you can get a copy of your deed and have them look at your title to ensure your discharges have been recorded. There are other facets of the registry, a lot of IT work that goes on to preserve these people with our IT department. But basically, that is the role of the Registry of Deeds, to protect everyone's title. And that includes rejecting documents that don't meet the standards. There are people that try to put on things that are not allowed by law, that require judicial approval before they're recorded. But that is the role of the Registry of Deeds. And I'm glad to use my second segment of time to do that today. Any questions, always call me, John Buckley at the Registry of Deeds. Thank you. Now, the third segment of today's show always is some Plymouth County history and some Plymouth colony history. So the first county history you're going to see is an image of Grover Cleveland. So Grover Cleveland was the 22nd and 24th President of the United States up until Donald Trump swearing in the other day. No president had been elected, defeated, and reelected. But Grover Cleveland was well known for his enjoyment of the outdoors. He spent his summers duck hunting and fishing while staying at the Idlewild Hotel in Manamet Bluffs. And he began his first term as president in 1884. He lost that job at re-election. The Prohibition League campaigned against his lifestyle. And in between those times, he worked very hard, and he was, after he was defeated by Benjamin Harrison, so he was reelected. And then during his second term, he bought a home in Buzzards Bay where he lived in the summers for many years. But when he fished and hunted in Manamet, he bought a piece of land there, but never built on it. The next image you're going to see is of Daniel Webster. During these political times, I thought it was important to highlight one of our great statesmen. He was a congressman in New Hampshire, educated and training in the law. He then established a law practice in Boston. He delivered an oration celebrating the bicentennial of the Pilgrims' arrival in Plymouth. He was a very famous constitutionalist. He believed very strongly in following the directions of the United States Constitution. He served in the Senate. He elected in 1827. He served until 1836. And he was appointed Secretary of State by the aforementioned President Harrison, and then reelected to the Senate, and then returned again as a Secretary of State. But he's best remembered for his skill in the pre-Civil War era at keeping the United States out of a civil war. And his home is still, or a replica of his home is still in Marshfield. And you can certainly visit that, go online to check that out. A last notable record, this being a political season, is a fellow by the name of Hastings Keith, who lived in West Bridgewater, the last congressman elected from Plymouth County. He was a leader in the establishment of the Cape Cod National Seashore. They purchased a home in West Bridgewater, and him and his wife lived there for many years. And then he donated a portion of the riverside to the town to increase the size of the War Memorial Park. But he began his career in the Massachusetts State Senate. He was elected in 1958 to the Congress, representing Plymouth County except Brockton, Cape Cod, and the islands. But his proudest achievement was a sponsorship creating the Cape Cod National Seashore, and he was honored by many people at the visit, including a recognition at the Visitor Center. But another major achievement, in 1959, a rumor was spread that cranberries were causing cancer, and the industry's use of pesticides was the source of that. It was devastating. One of Plymouth County's major industries, cranberries, which are still there today when you drive down through southern Plymouth County, Carver and Wareham and other communities. But he had the federal government conduct a study to prove those fears were incorrect. And when he later succeeded in that effort, he had a water cooler in his Washington, D.C., not filled with water, but it was filled with cranberry juice. He had a great interest in historic preservation, pension reform, And there's a building named in his honor in the city of New Bedford, which was part of his district. It was rededicated to him in 2004, shortly before his death in 2005. Now, we always talk about one of our colonial records. This one relates to a probate issue back in 1633, certainly in the colony era. And by a person named Peter Brown died without a will. And he had diverse children because many of his wives had preceded him. So in his will, he provided 15 pounds for one daughter under the standard of money at the time, 15 pounds to a different daughter. He had several of his children be indentured servants to work for different people, and he set aside money for them after they had provided their service. And his estate provided forever legacies to his former wives, and those are spelled out very clearly in that court order in 1633. So our colonial records cover a lot of things. First trial by jury, by the colonial court, first deed, setting up a recording system, but also many probate issues, and we talk about one today. So once again, I want to thank the folks here at Brockton Cable Access for allowing me to share what we do. We love to tell people about real estate. For most people, their home is their most valuable asset. We try to protect it. You have to work vigilantly to protect your property. And again, I want to thank Michelle Hebsche and the people here at Brockton Cable Access for allowing me to produce this show. So we'll see you in the next month.